Hello and welcome to Interviews with Ivan. My name is Ivan Demosten. I'm the CEO of Hamilton Demo, and we're coming to you from downtown Cincinnati, Ron Hamilton Photo. And we're going to bring to you some interviews and conversations from people within diversity and inclusion and other business leaders and nonprofit leaders. And we're hoping that you'll welcome the conversations, welcome the interviews, and please follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and subscribe to us as well. Any and all feedback is appreciated. Thank you so much. And I have Judy Ellis with me today. Thank you for joining me, Judy.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Judy is the CEO of ThinkPeople. We originally met while Judy was on a project with a board here in Hamilton County, and we partnered together, and hopefully I was able to help you out and be of added value. But please tell us a little bit about yourself and about ThinkPeople.
Okay. Well, as you know, Ivan, I've started off in my career at P&G here in town, where I worked for 10 years, primarily in HR and corporate communications. But when I was in those roles, I was always drawn to the people side of the business, and I was pulled to work in the diversity and inclusion space a lot. So after 10 years, I joined my husband and we co-founded a diversity and inclusion business. But about 2 years ago, I started ThinkPeople because I wanted to do more organization development and be able to work on strategy and culture that included diversity and inclusion, but where that was integrated into an overall culture strategy.
Yeah, great. So I've actually seen you in action. Since you mentioned it, share a little bit about maybe some of the nuances and the ways that you approach boards when they're talking about diversity and ways that you help them frame that within their organization.
Often what I do at the beginning is come in and do a really deep dive listening experience and an organizational audit or culture audit to try to find out what are the key things that really are important to them. Because frankly, some of the groups I work with are somewhat monocultural and they are small. So it could take a long time for them to increase their diversity in terms of people's ethnic background, racial backgrounds, etc. But once I do the audit, I really often find out, in this instance, generational diversity is a real issue that they need to work on. Or something else might come up, like the project I worked on with you, where succession planning was really important, and it ended up needing to be an executive placement position. So if it's pretty much a people-related issue, I have some partners and we can do a solution.
Great, I love that, because even in my experience, I'm interested to know how they react when you say, before we move further, let's have a cultural audit or diversity audit. What is their reaction to that when they first hear that from you?
Well, I think having worked in corporate communications for years, I can sense what terminology might be off-putting to a client, but really I'm saying I want to diagnose well what really matters to you and what your people are really asking for. So it's kind of like, let me help you get the voice of the employee so you understand what the issues are that are most significant for you, because every organization, as you know, is different.
Yeah, no, that's great. So obviously you just didn't wake up one day and fall into this. So share a little bit of how this became your world.
Well, really going back to undergraduate school at Indiana University, I was a management and organizations major in business school, and one summer I had a fellowship where you could design it to study whatever you wanted to. And my sisters are 10 and 12 years older than me, so they were already in the workforce. And I would hear their friends when they came over in the summers talking about their experiences. And many of them were African American and were saying, I'm having some different experiences in corporate America than I think my peers are. So I said, I would like to study the issues of women and minorities entering corporate space and find out what's really going on. And so my first professor said, well, the first step is to do a really exhaustive literature search. And there was only one book at the time, which was called The Black Manager by Floyd and Jackie Dickens.
Okay.
And making, life is a circle. When I moved here to Cincinnati, Eric, my husband, was a family friend of the Dickens. And so for the first few years, he was subcontracting with their company.
Oh,
but reading that book and beginning to learn about organizational development issues in college kind of gave me that framework and an interest. But once I got to P&G, and we kept having retention issues, progression issues, and I was often pulled to work on a committee to help study this, help us solve this issue. That's when I really got passionate about it, because we spend so much of our life at work that I want people to feel fully included and fully themselves and able to rise to the level of their ability with no barriers. And so thinking about that is what makes me get up every day, because I feel like I'm helping make just a more fair and equitable workplace, and also somewhere where every person is contributing their best. So innovation is increased, profitability is increased. And now there's many studies by Harvard Business Review and others showing that when you build trust and build engagement, you get better profits. It's not just a nice thing to do.
Yeah, so that's fascinating stuff. I love it. And apparently the seed was planted for Think People years ago, right? So, you mentioned how your friends and your sister's friends. How did you see things work or change, or how did they evolve in their workplace as well? Did some of those things continue to persist, or were there opportunities for you to continue the conversation with them?
Well, over time, what happened, and this was in the early 90s, which I'm giving away some of my age, but it began to become a noticed issue in corporate America. And there started to become things like employee resource groups to support female employees, to support Asian, African American, Latinx employees, so that they had a sense of community when they were somewhere. A funny story, when I first moved to corporate communications, at that time, P&G had never had a senior executive that was a female. And my boss was promoted to a senior executive position while I was there. And she had to stay in our department in corporate communications for a couple of months after she got promoted, because there was no women's restroom on the floor, 11th floor, where she was supposed to move to.
Wow.
So they had to do some structural, physical things in the building to accommodate her. And that was in the late 90s. But it just shows the evolution that it just never occurred that we would really need this space for someone of a different gender to be able to even use the bathroom. So now, where we realize if we don't have all the brightest minds, no matter what their background is, sitting at the table, feeling included and able to contribute, we're not getting the best out of people.
Yeah. So even a great company like P&G, who does, since I've known them, they always have tried and strived to do things for diversity, be an inclusive, global inclusive company. Tell me a little bit more, since you were on the ground level of those ERGs being developed, and for those that don't know what ERGs, resource groups, employee resource groups, business resource groups, etc. Share a little bit what you were able to see as those were being created within.
Well, I was there during the time, as you said, when they were new to have formalized groups, because the initial thought is, why should we have a special group? Because we're all one family, we're all one group of employees. But what has been studied now in sociological research is that when you are different, there's often some more emotional tax and stress that you're managing. There's stereotype threat, which could cause performance differences if you feel that the weight of the whole culture is on your shoulders. So
Right.
what that group did was give people a place to kind of normalize their experiences, learn from each other. Who can we turn to find mentors and sponsors when it was more difficult to cross some of those barriers. And so it just gives people a place to feel that they can relax and be at home inside their company. It's almost like having, a family space where people can let their hair down and seek support. And now they're being even more formalized and helping with development, etc.
Yeah, especially some of those resource groups out there that look for insight into marketing, into new demographics, etc. There's so much. So thanks for sharing that. I think that's fascinating. You were there at a really interesting time for sure. And so I heard through from a little birdie through the grapevine that you're going to be speaking at UC, the Gary Group there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, UC has a Gehring Center for Family and Private Business, which is really a membership organization for family and private businesses. They provide a lot of training and customized services because often when you're in the family and private business space, you have unique issues that are different. You may be handing over a business to the next generation, and there are some generational issues. You may need some leadership development training that might be de rigueur at a global company, but you don't really know where to resource it. So the Gehring Center offers that, and they have a series of speakers for 2021, and I'm happy to be involved. But right now, we're thinking I'm probably going to be in the spring in April.
Okay.
Because they want my presentation, if possible, to be face to face versus virtual, which is how they're starting the year. And I'm really going to be talking about leadership and vulnerability and how bringing your humanness to work as a leader really helps to engender trust and make teams work together more successfully.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think I've seen the work that you've done with ThinkPeople, and even with small businesses, I think they can get a lot of value from that as well, especially if they're growing, if they want to grow, right? The dynamics change, and yeah. How has the pandemic really impacted your engagement with your clients, your business at ThinkPeople, and the way that you relate? You mentioned the Gehring Center. You're hoping to have in person. We're doing a lot of virtual things now. How has that impacted you as a whole in all those ways?
I mean, it was pretty crushing initially because a lot of my work is face to face.
Yes.
Doing training, stand-up trainings where I'm delivering it in person, speaking at conferences, and all of a sudden in March, just email after email was saying, we're postponing, we're canceling, we need to reschedule. And it was just, took me a minute to regroup. It was like, okay, so clearly I'm not going to be working with clients as much during this period. What can I really do? But one of my clients approached me actually and said, Judy, we really want to use this time to build up our skills of our management team. Can you offer your classes virtually? And I'll tell you, I was a little nervous because I was kind of a virtual novice in terms of offering training. And I'm so much used to being in a classroom, even taught workforce diversity for master's level students at UC, but I'm used to that interaction. And so I told him, give me a few days, and talked to some colleagues who said, of course you can do this. It's just your fear holding you back. And so very quickly, I was able to pivot to offering synchronous training where I'm still doing it just had to make some pivots to make it much more interactive and keep some of the fun in and allow people to use breakout rooms and still do the small group work that they were doing. And so now 90% of my business has moved to Zoom and other technology platforms. And I'm happy to say that the evaluations are coming back great. So I think I'm still serving my clients, and my coaching clients are preferring Zoom because they're not, having to go away from their day as much. I can just meet them all over the computer.
Well, I've had the pleasure of seeing you in action in the past few months. I think one of your clients on one of your boards called in from the Dominican Republic, if I remember. So I think you handled it very well. It was very impactful for me to see that. So I can see how you've been able to provide some benefits in that and pivoting. So.
And you helped me there with your background. It was like, who knew this client would have a connection to the island that Ivan is from? That really helped me.
those little synchronicities aren't lost on me either. So definitely that was good. So getting to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know that sometimes your clients need a little bit framing of those terms and what the differences are, the nuances. Share a little bit with us on how you approach that with your clients.
I'd like to start by really clearly defining terms so we all have a common language and we know what we're talking about. Because I've had a lot of calls. I mean, business is booming right now, but a lot of calls in the last few months with the social and racial unrest. Even with companies that are more monocultural, don't have a lot of different groups of people working there that are interested and want to stay abreast of this. And so diversity really talks about the mix of people. Often people think of it in terms of numbers. Do we have women? Do we have African Americans? Do we have Latinx, LGBTQ, etc. employees here? And that's one level of looking at how your demographic makeup. The next thing really is thinking about inclusion. And that just means how fully able are all divergent voices in your organization able to contribute? Do people feel their ideas are listened to? Is there a sense of psychological safety so that at a meeting I can have a divergent point of view? I can offer you my perspective. And you alluded to it earlier, but some of my friends that stayed at P&G were a group of primarily African-American scientists and marketers that said, we can make a huge difference in the ethnic hair care market if you give us, some room to grow and to do it. And they've turned it into a multi-million-dollar, probably billion-dollar, or entered a billion-dollar business in ethnic hair care because they realized there were consumers with needs that weren't being met. And so they developed a whole line of products that is now bringing lots of money globally into the company because the consumer insights they had uniquely that other people didn't have, they were able to use and serve consumers and make more money at the same time. So it's just thinking about how do we get all the voices included? That's the inclusion piece. And equity is just, are we being fair? Are our systems helping us or hurting us in terms of allowing everyone to get through? One car manufacturing client I had used to have a policy where they required all people to get to plant manager to live somewhere else and work out of state. And what that was causing was women to turn down the roles because they are still primarily very close to home and childcare, and their children's schools was so important to them. And once we looked at that and brought it to light, they said, you know what, there are lots of other ways to get these experiences. We don't have to have people move out of town. And lo and behold, suddenly a lot more women became qualified for the role. And one of the plant managers now in Kentucky is a woman. who says that policy in and of itself about 10 years ago, that change allowed her to rise to where she's at now.
Right. No, that's fascinating. I just keep getting blown away. I love that your experience in the corporate world personally, in your consulting role, you've got a whole rainbow of experiences. What I'm interested to know more about is how do you think those experiences that you've had has helped you with your clients at ThinkPeople? What kind of gives you that added bonus of what clients can expect from you?
Well, I like to think that I kind of cut my teeth and got my background at an extremely valuable place for training. I mean, I can't say how much I enjoyed my experiences at Procter and Gamble and how much I learned while I was there. And that attention to detail and always having a focus on what's best for the people and what's best for the business, and keeping those two things front of mind, because sometimes I think we can get lost in the weeds. I know especially I can, because I have kind of an academic researcher interest too.
Yeah.
And I can be digging so far, and then it's like, wait, what's the big picture here? What's best for the people? What's best for the business? So it gave me a lot of training and exposure to thinking about the holistic picture of business, because I find, I'll tell you what a friend of mine who's a consultant says, who's been most of her life as an external consultant, that I understand the business more than she does. And it's like when you come in and they start talking about manufacturing and their processes and, you know, the numbers, it's kind of going over my head, but you are able to connect to what it is that's important to the client, and then show them how their people side of their business fits into the bigger picture. And it's not only internally focused. I think I help people see how helping your employees be more engaged plays out with your customers. It helps them listen better to them when I teach listening. It helps them understand how to deal with global customers when we talk about diversity and inclusion. It just flows all the way through the system.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So what can those do that are interested, or people who might just want to learn more about what you can do for their company? How do they go about that other than calling me? How can they get a hold of Judy Ellis?
Well, I encourage them to reach out to us via our website. It's thinkpeoplellc.com. Or they can find me on LinkedIn, Judy Ellis with ThinkPeople.
We're connected too, yes.
Yes, Ivan and I are LinkedIn friends. I was a LinkedIn master, so. But I'm connected on LinkedIn as well, and you know, I'm pretty transparent. It's pretty easy to find me.
Great. So, and your number's on there, and you've got, okay, great, because we'll make sure that we share that with people as well. So, Judy, thank you for stopping down here at Hamilton Photo Studios in downtown Cincinnati. It's been great having you, and let's find a way to get you back here. I love the conversation.
Thank you so much, Ivan. You're such a generous host and business partner. I love working with you.
Oh, my pleasure. Looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.